We'll see. But let's start on the Chargers side of the ball. Lighten up Phillip Rivers.
Lighten
It gets
him
a
up.
yeah. You lighten him up. You fucking line him up. You put him in your lineup. You gonna fucking give him one of those 1-2s.
We get him in the. You're in Rivers.
Rummenheimer, you're in. Yeah, I like Rivers this week. If you got him, just some numbers on him right now. Actually kind of crazy when you think about who leads the NFL in passing yards. It's actually Phillip Rivers, but you wouldn't think so because he hasn't been having this crazy good year. But leads the league in passing yards with 2,609 yards, averaging 290 passing yards. And these are just good to know that he's, throwing for 290 passing yards a game and leading the NFL because the Raiders are actually giving up the most passing yards a game. They're giving up 297 passing yards a game. And they've also allowed the second most passing touchdowns, 22 passing touchdowns so far. So, the stars are kind of aligned right here for Rivers, even on a short week to come in and kind of put up, at least some low-end QB1 numbers, I would assume.
Yeah, I think you look at Rivers as like 8 to 12 range.
Yeah.
Good matchup. The Raiders are their top 7 defense against the run, giving up on 100 yards a game. I know the new philosophy with the Chargers is they wanted to get the run game going, and they did last week. They fired their coordinator. But just looking at where the Raiders weak at, like Tyler said, they're weak against the pass. They're a little bit better against the run. The yardage has been there. The touchdowns haven't been there. So you got to figure there's some regression or progression or whatever the hell that word is, where it's like, he's due for the amount of yards he's throwing. He's due for some touchdowns and a safe play this week.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to go out there and lose a game for you.
What would you say, Mike?
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So we can get into the running backs. Melvin Gordon looked good last week. I think it was his first game, averaging more than probably 2 yards a carry.
Which is
for
crazy.
sure. I'm joking, but not really joking that much.
Right.
He was 24, I think 80 something on the ground, 2 touchdowns, and I know he had 30 yards receiving. So it gives me confidence in Melvin Gordon going forward. I've touched on how systems could change the whole landscape of an offense, and new coordinator, and they said they did what they wanted to do, and you saw it. So I think you can start him with confidence, going forward.
It's
and this week.
Yeah, it's just tricky for Gordon here. So, looking at some of the numbers here, he has 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. It could be 5 touchdowns, actually, if he didn't fumble the one at the 1-yard line, actually for the game against the Titans. So, but 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, but he's only topped 50 yards once since he's come back from the holdout, and that was this last game where he put up, I think it was 109 total scrimmage yards. So that's kind of like, you like seeing the touchdowns, but the total scrimmage yards aren't there. And then also the last 4 games, his rushing attempts have been 8, 16, 8, and 20. But, with that being said, I find it'd probably be hard to bench him. I think but like you just said, the Raiders are pretty stingy against the run, right?
They were giving up 90-something yards a game. But the philosophy, my thing is I point out the philosophy is they fired the coach. It's like last year when Dalvin Cook broke out for the second half. They were like, we're not running the ball enough. What did they do? They fired the coach for passing too much. They went out there, they ran the ball, and Dalvin Cook became a stud for the last 5 games, and he hasn't stopped since then. So it's kind of like they're I'm not saying he's going to be a top 5 back, but they're basically saying, hey, we want to run the ball. We need to run the ball efficiently. We fired the coach. We had success again this week. So I think that's at least the game plan going forward. Now, does he run for 2 yards a carry or 4.5? I can't tell you that. But does he probably get another 15 carries on the ground, maybe more? I think that's in the high probability.
For me, honestly, the Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler, because I think you can play both of these guys. They're just more like RB2 guys. Obviously the bust potential's there, but the RB1 upside's there for each one of these guys. Just some numbers on Ekler. He's got 2 receiving touchdowns in the last 3 games, and we kind of just touched on how the Raiders are just giving up the most passing yards in the whole league. And I know Melvin Gordon can be used out of the backfield and catch the ball too, but I think if there's one guy who's primarily the pass catcher, it's probably Austin Eckler. So I still feel comfortable playing Ekler, at least as a low-end RB2. And I know Gordon, got the 2 touchdowns last week, but actually they each had 2 carries inside the 5-yard line. Melvin Gordon just was kind of on the luckier side of converting both those carries for touchdowns, where Austin Eckler got stuffed on both of his carries inside the 5.
Yeah. Just looking at some quick numbers, it's like I think there's something with both these backs to see a little bit more efficiency on the ground. Melvin Gordon was not running very well before that, but neither was Austin Eckler. 5 rushes for 14 yards, 5 rushes for 7 yards, 3 rushes for 3 yards. It's maybe they've switched up the blocking scheme, went from a power to zone. I don't know what they were running before, but there's reason to believe that maybe they switched something up and it's going to be working for both these guys going forward. I do notice too that Austin Eckler's snaps were the lowest they've been all year last year. They were 34% for Ekler and 65% for Gordon.
Yeah.
So that's something where it's like if I'm a Gordon owner and not an Ekler owner, if I see that again, that kind of gives me like a boost of confidence that, okay, maybe he's back to his role and Eckler's back to his role going forward if we see it for 2 weeks straight. But yeah, I agree with you. So I think you can start both these guys.
Yeah. I mean, just some more stuff on them. They did get the left tackle back, Russell Okung, I think his name is. So that's obviously going to boost the offensive line and help the run game right there. But, I mean, kind of a tough matchup this week. Next week, they have a juicy matchup. It's a green-rated matchup. When we say green-rated matchup, that means it's like versus one of the bottom 5 defenses in terms of allowing the most points to that position. But after that, I think they could have a bye. But after that, would you maybe be trying to move Melvin Gordon? Because the playoff schedule, weeks 14, 15, and 16 is, I mean, it's not your dream scenario playoff schedule here, especially for a running back who's splitting carries and kind of a shaky offensive line. But week 14, they're at Jacksonville. They're the 15th hardest. Then next week, they're home against Minnesota, who's a red-rated matchup. They're the 28th hardest, meaning that they're pretty stingy against the run. And then they finish up the season at home against Oakland, who's the 20th hardest. So kind of a tough playoff schedule. I mean, if you have Melvin Gordon and he kind of goes off these next 2 weeks, would you try to move him, or are you just kind of holding tight on him?
I mean, it's like move him for – I mean, if I need a receiver and I'm deep at running back or I need help, yeah, I can move him, but – you are risking the chance that he is a top 10 back the rest of the way.
Yeah.
It's a realistic risk, and you have to understand that if you're going to move him. I had a friend ask me for trade advice a minute ago, and it was Melvin Gordon, Aaron Rodgers. No, it was Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Freeman, and Cortland Sutton for Melvin Gordon and Stephon Diggs. And I told him, I was like, and he's like, I have no quarterback. He had no quarterback.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's not a bad trade. You're giving up more, and you're kind of almost breaking even with the other two, but you're getting a quarterback in return. I was like, and he has some running back depth too. He's like James Conner. I'm like, but understand that like there is the possibility that going forward, Melvin Gordon is a top 10 back. And I was like, just know that that's a range of outcome in there. And he's like, I'm cool with that if that happens. He's like, I need the quarterback and I got some depth. So, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, you can make that flip to move, and he did that, and he got a quarterback and almost broke even on the receiver running back side.
Yeah.
But he was able to do that. So that's where I'm okay. But you do have to understand that it's in the range of possibilities that he is a top 10 going forward. And even with the schedule, it's not like these guys are shut down defenses, and sometimes just talent and team can overcome a tough matchup. We see it week after week. So, like in a straight like that, like I said, that kind of worked out for him. So it's like I'm not going to move him just to move him, but if I'm getting something to help my team in the playoffs, then yeah, I'm okay with it.
Just kind of like running back that popped in my head off the top of my head here. The schedule for David Montgomery down the stretch is money, and we actually touched on in the Instagram. It's @AverageBros_fantasy football. But we kind of did a poll of like the first half for David Montgomery has been super tough, but the second half is one of the easiest. A ton of green rated matchups down the stretch for him. Mike
Some
loves
porno
it, dude.
music.
Yeah, Mike loved
Mike's
it.
getting turned
He
on
loved
over
that
there.
schedule. But we've kind of seen David Montgomery kind of emerge. 2 games of 20-plus points, back-to-back games. He's been on the field 70+% of the snaps. Would you move Gordon for like a Montgomery just because okay, this guy's getting 70+% of the snaps, all the goal line carries, or are you just kind of holding tight with the top 10 upside of a Gordon? This is like a top. This is kind of like a top of my head kind of guy.
I personally would.
No,
that's just I just don't. I mean, Montgomery had a good game 2 weeks ago. If you take away those 2 touchdowns last week, he's back to where he was as far as 2-point-something yards per carry. Even the game before, he had 20-something carries. He broke off one run, which is the first run he's broken off all year. You take that away, I did the math. He was at 3-point yards per carry again.
Yeah.
So it's just the efficiency. I'm just not seeing it yet. I could be completely wrong because he's a rookie and he could develop, but I'm not risking it. Me personally, that's my own personal feel on it.
for sure.
Interesting.
Interesting.
You want to move on to tight ends?
I mean,
Go on,
we do the
Hunter?
receivers.
Oh yeah, we do receivers. Yeah. Fuck me. I mean, what? Let's go.
Fuck you.
I mean, with that being said, earlier we just touched on Rivers, talking about how you most passing yards, and then the Raiders are just giving it up through the air. I think this is kind of where we see maybe a Mike Williams breakout game. And here's a guy I was super high on coming into the year, and it just kind of hasn't panned out. But it's kind of been like it's like he had 54. He has 54 targets this year, right? 0 touchdowns. Last year he only had 66, but he had 10 touchdowns. So it's like the touchdowns. It's just crazy to think that he hasn't had a touchdown because he's gotten 7. He's gotten 8 end zone targets. So he's gotten 8 targets in the end zone, but he's got 0 touchdowns. And the 8 end zone targets are 7th most in the NFL. So the opportunity is there. He just hasn't, capitalized on it. So I think this could be a game where he does capitalize finally. Maybe we see like a 2 touchdown game out of Mike Williams here, especially because the Raiders are allowing the 2nd most points to wide receivers, the 3rd most points to wide receivers who line up outside. So I think this could be a big game here for Big Mike Williams. He's also averaging 18.3 yards per catch, and that's the 6th most in the NFL in terms of yards per catch.
I feel like he had a 3 touchdown game against the Raiders last year.
I think it was the Chiefs because he had that
Chiefs.
walkout. Yeah,
Knew it was AFC West team.
yeah, but I think it was a Thursday night game. So maybe he's
just the Thursday night whore.
He's the Thursday night guy.
He just goes out there and fucking whores out on Thursday nights.
He's a guy for me. Maybe it's just because like it's a man crush, but he's a guy I'll be trying to trade for if I can. If I can get him on the low. I mean, I'm not selling the house for him, but if I can move him, maybe someone's kind of just frustrated with him because he's not scoring any touchdowns. Because like I just said, there's definitely gonna be some positive regression coming. I mean, it's just. The targets are there. The end zone targets there. The red zone targets are there. I mean, 18.3 yards per catch. Everything is there. It's just it's kind of like a mirage of how he hasn't been able to find the end zone after getting 10 touchdowns last year on only 66 targets. So I think there's going to be some more positive touchdown regression coming for him. With that being said, how do you feel about Keenan Allen? Because it's kind of been like he started off super hot and then kind of cooled down. And he's kind of been like middle of the pack, nothing crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you still got to start him.
He's like a set it and forget it.
Yeah,
every week.
his targets are. It was down last game, but I mean, still week 8, 10 targets. Week 11, week 7, 11 targets. The eight targets only the receiver position in general last week.
Yeah.
10 or Hunter Henry. So I hope we don't see that again. Otherwise, we're going to see a kind of a probably down games for Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. But yeah, you're still rolling him out there. I think he's more of a. You kind of had him as a wide receiver 1 in the beginning of the year, but with some other guys emerging, I think he's, kind of a low end 1 wide receiver 2 at this point. You got to adjust as the season goes on and kind of understand what you have.
Is he like a buy low target for you, maybe? I mean, obviously you can't trade for him right now, so maybe if he goes out and has a huge game, it'll be tough for you to kind of buy low on him. But let's say he just has like a pedestrian game. Maybe he just has like 6 catches, 80 yards type of game, nothing crazy, no touchdowns. Is he a guy you're trying to maybe acquire on the low before the trade deadline?
Possibly.
Or you just kind of like it's too up and down. You're not sure. You don't want to play the Russian roulette of boom bust each and every week.
Yeah, I think it's kind of. I just think what you'd have to give up to get him because the name is going to be too much. Even though he is up and down, and you're trying to buy low, and I just think that his name and what people do early in the year kind of sticks with them. It's like, oh, I have Keenan Allen, like you got me, like he was a wide receiver like 1 almost for the first like 5-6 weeks, and that kind of just sticks with people.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard to pry him away. You'll have to probably give up more than you want to, unfortunately.
For sure. With that being said, Hunter Henry, I think with the tight end landscape, you just said he had 10 targets last week.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're definitely starting Hunter Henry here, especially with the touchdown upside. They like to use him in the red zone and he gets all those end zone targets as well. What about the Chargers defense? They shut down Aaron Rodgers and this whole Packers offense last week.
Well, didn't you know that Aaron Rodgers, they said they didn't prepare for the game. That's why. Did you see that?
No.
I guess Aaron Rodgers said that about the team.
Really?
Yeah, he's like, yeah, we just didn't prepare. That's what happened.
Okay.
It's good intel, dude.
No, but I'm just saying.
That's why you're the locker room correspondent.
I'm being sarcastic. I'm not saying I'm making an excuse for the defense to be good. But yeah, I think you can play the Chargers defense. I just think that there could be a lot of points scored in this game.
Yeah, 49-point over-under. I actually like the over in this game. I do think it's kind of a lot more points.
That's what I get afraid of when I play defenses. Like, even though I could see Derek Carr making some mistakes, I do think it's a divisional game, and I think it will be kind of a passing shootout.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I'd be playing the Chargers in this one. I mean, you got like you touched on the waiver episode, you got the Giants out there who've been pretty decent against defense. They're playing against Sam Darnold. He's a turnover machine.
I'd rather play like the Lions defense against the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, you got the Ravens. They're at Cincinnati. They were like 50% available. And then you got like the Colts who are going to be playing against Miami.
Yeah, there's a couple different defenses that I'd rather play over the Chargers.
For sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I was listening to like I've kind of been listening to just like NFL people podcasts, like where it's not like they don't they don't have fantasy in mind,
Right.
and it's just like they just talk like straight football. Because I think it gives a little bit of a different perspective because it's like fantasy football. Anyone who talks it, they're so like analytical, where it's like numbers, this, that, and to step away and kind of listen to people like talk just on the football side, it gives you more of like, okay, like you get a different perspective and
Right.
viewpoint.
You
from
can
it.
kind of see the game script a little bit better when you look at the game like that, I think.
Yeah, and they were talking about how, Derek Carr they just have a top 5 offensive line this year in general, like through the run, through the air. I know the Chargers do have a good defensive line, but I mean he's only thrown 2 picks in his last 1, 2, 3, 4, like 8 games. Quarterback rating's been pretty high. I mean over 100 for the last 1, 2, 3. He's just basically not having a lot of turnovers. He's not getting sacked a lot. He's been sacked once in the last 5 games.
Derek Carr.
Yeah, so you're not seeing like the things you want for defense. And like we said, there's some better streaming options out there. So kind of like I'd probably try and find a better streaming option this week. Like I said, just looking at the sacks, the offensive line play, they were talking how he's actually starting to create some stuff with his legs. Like he's moving in the pocket, he's extending plays a little bit, and that's why you've seen him be efficient over the last 3-4 weeks. So I'd probably, like I said, try and find one of those streamer defense we just all touched on.
Yeah.
Sure.
BRB Blazer.
Okay.
Oh.